Well, thanks for you all for coming. I see 100 of you participating, so you're all very welcome. Hard to follow such an emotional talk, but we'll get on with the business of BritSpine and the UKSSB, and this is an opportunity for you all to give us some feedback about both this meeting, but also the direction and on what's been happening in the UKSSB. Now, I've written a chair's report, which I'll run through briefly, and then I'll ask Mike Grevitt to talk as secretary, and then Neil Orpin to talk as treasurer. And then we'll have some discussion. We have to finish at about 6:15 because there's a BAS meeting that follows this. So clearly, the shape of BritSpine has had to adapt to COVID whilst maintaining its relevance to members and constituent societies. And it's shown up thrown up a whole lot of challenges, mostly because the whole thing is completely new to us. So apologies for the many glitches throughout the last couple of days. Hopefully they're becoming less frequent as people become more familiar with how the system works, when not to turn on your mic and when to. I think all our coronary arteries have been challenged. Fortunately, Henry Dodds's are much younger than the rest of ours, and that's served us very well. The COVID and then the postponement of the meeting in Glasgow showed up weaknesses in our constitution, our insurance, and our contractual legalities, which have to be addressed in the future. They're going to be reviewed, and Mike Grevitt has looked at these in a lot of detail, and we're going to be setting up a small working group to try and take these things forwards, and he'll talk about that a little bit more. It's my last meeting as chair of the UKSSB. I've been in the post for 3 years, and it's been a great honour to work with such a great group of inspiring people. We need to select another chair, and so if you want to apply, please look on the UKSSB website where the details are posted. It's all going to happen in the next few weeks, when we'll also be reflecting on the successes and failures of this meeting. So we look to the future with a team of new people that will be interacting with the UK Spinal Society's board. Mike has brought a lot of energy and expertise as new secretary, highlighting the deficiencies that the COVID epidemic has thrown up and designing the best arrangements for the future. But he's also been very helpful in widening our international appeal, as you saw today with the NAS contribution in the endoscopy session. The finances looked quite perilous when we were in a position to potentially cancel the meeting in April last year. But fortunately, these are looking in much better shape. The finances essentially pay for our executive assistant, who works for BritSpine, but also contributes very significantly to BAS and BSS. And those of you that have been attending the BAS webinars know just how important his contribution has been. Neil's going to speak to the finances. His belt tightening has been very important in getting us through these difficult times. This has led to some restraints, particularly in funding scholarships, clearly in how we run meetings, which are now all Zoom rather than face-to-face meetings. But we hope in the future that these scholarships will be resourced again. So I want to thank all the UKSS board members over the last 3 years who've contributed so much to getting this meeting off the ground through its various phases. There have obviously been a lot of imperfections, but if we can get feedback from you on how best to manage meetings in the future, that will be extremely helpful. So now I'll ask Mike if he could give us a quick input as the secretary.
Thanks, Patrick. Henry, could I have the first slide, please? So, as Patrick has said, it's been an extraordinary journey getting to this point. And I think many of you will probably appreciate how turbulent it was in the early part of last year. And at one point, I think it's perhaps not dramatic to say that, you know, UKSSB and the societies were looking down the barrel of a six-figure potential non-indemnified loss relating to the event, the face-to-face event in Glasgow. And that whole episode, as Patrick says, revealed and shone a light on deficiencies that hitherto we've never considered, because BritSpine has always been a very successful and financially advantageous conference to us. But the fact that we had to cancel, or in fact on the day actually, it was requisitions at the Nightingale Hospital, essentially got us off the hook. Next slide, Henry, have we got the... Yeah. So what came up in that whole development was principally around liabilities of the officers, both within the UKSSB exec and also those society officers who are seconded onto the board. And essentially that fell from a decision that was taken in 2017 when obviously that the present exec and board members weren't party to that decision. But a decision in 2017 to move from a limited liability company to what we have now is an unincorporated association. And what that means, if you're not aware, is that we don't have a separate legal entity. So things like setting our own contracts, how we determine our assets, etc., are very different from when you have a limited liability company. But the main issue is that all the exec team and all the officers of the board of UKSSB are what was called jointly and severally liable. In other words, that both past officers and also the present officers, were there to be a severe financial loss or there was a claim made against UKSSB, would collectively, that's a joint bit, or individually, so were a claimant to pursue a claim against any one individual, they are at liberty to do so in this unincorporated association structure. And furthermore, it also transpired that as a association, we had no third-party liability. Although officially Henry is employed by the BOA, for all intents and purposes, he is an employee and legally he would be viewed as such of the UKSSB, and we had no employer liability. And also things like ICO liability, cybercrime, we had no indemnity for any of those liabilities. And that currently, as it stands at the moment, any BritSpine events insurance is not held, and we have no control as UKSSB, it's held by events organizer Archer Yates. Next slide, please, Henry. Henry, can I have the next slide? Yeah. And what has also emerged is that the Constitution was essentially migrated with a few changes, to the best of my knowledge, from its previous thing. And once we've actually shared it with some legal opinion, the opinion was it's poorly drafted. The definition of who are members versus officers, and what, in terms of legacy liability, the entry and exit criteria, and any forms of redress or misdemeanor clauses were absent. So in terms of a potential risk, were there any problems? Thankfully, there hasn't been. But overall, in terms of the resilience and robustness of the Constitution, it would not presently stand up to much scrutiny if we were challenged. And also the definition of what the legacy liabilities, any residual liability for officers that rotate off, and what the apportionment of liability, if it ever came to a claim. All these came to light during our journey when we came to eventually cancel the face-to-face event. Last slide, please, Henry. So I just really wanted to finish on where we are in terms of progress. So what we have instigated as a board is that currently some of the deficiencies in terms of indemnity have been rectified. We currently have some directors and officers, third-party liability, cybercrime, and ICO insurance in the event of some huge data breach. The societies individually, some more advanced than others, are taking steps to indemnify their seconded officers, and there is some shared and mutual learning in terms of how we can each adapt our respective constitutions to make it more robust and fit for purpose. And also, by virtue of the fact this is because this is a virtual event, the financial risk, thankfully, has subsided significantly, and as you will hear from Neil, that there is no significant material risk of any of the officers being made liable. But as Patrick has said, moving forwards, as the board is reconfigured with some new changes, there is an urgent need to consider a new incorporated structure in order to protect present and future officers and members of the board. There is also a very pressing need to redraft the Constitution to shore up the deficiencies that have been made very clear by the events, recent past events, and that we really do need to have some legal oversight and sign-off, which will necessarily incur some small expense relative to the risk of not doing that. And on that note, I'll just hand back and thank you very much.
Do you want to carry on playing that, Henry? And I'll just add a bit to the end if I don't get enough message across.
Right, good evening. I'm Neil Orpin. I've been acting as Treasurer for the UKSSB for the last 3 years, and essentially since the last successful BritSpine, when I took over from Nick Birch, who had served as Treasurer before me. We did take over in the UK in a very good financial position, and at that time, we certainly didn't know what was up ahead, and COVID, of course, has dominated everything in our lives for the last year at least. But it has meant a postponed BritSpine, and the implications of that have been significant. The UKSSB supports its constituent societies with income it generates exclusively from the BritSpine meeting. And by having a delay like this, it has meant we've had an extra cycle with no income, but of course ongoing expenses. In our typical years, we support the societies. Any profit after expenses is distributed to our constituent societies. And we support leadership programs, research programs, and have a number of administrative responsibilities for the societies as well. And therefore, in any year, we do have ongoing expenses. And therefore, the main purpose for our last cycle has been the inevitable delay to BritSpine and then troubleshooting our expenses over the last year. Now, in reality, what we've done is we've significantly restricted ourselves. We've stopped funding most of our luxuries, and we've kept our costs to a minimum. And I'll place a slide up, which I'll share with you, which does show what our expenses typically are. Hopefully that is self-explanatory, but without going into the exact details, the important things to take away are that in a good year, such as 2018, when we've had a successful BritSpine and a significant income, our expenses and our spending is approximately £130,000 in a year. Now, unfortunately, in a year like 2020, we've had no income, and therefore we've restricted ourselves down to the bare minimum of expenses, which is about £50,000, which runs the administration of UKSSB and some of our constituent societies. But by doing this, we've stopped our research fellowships. We've significantly limited how much money we contribute to other programs. And one success of the last year certainly has been the digitalization of much of what we do. And therefore, we have been able to cut down our travel and expenses we have in getting societies and membership together. But I think that's about the only good thing that's come of the last year. So going forward, we will be appointing a new treasurer to take over on the executive, and I hope members of our societies will be interested in taking up that opportunity. And the challenge for the forthcoming cycle now will be to try to get ourselves back on balanced books and try and get ourselves back to where we were in 2018, where we can be more liberal and generous with our expenses and how we distribute money to those programs that are beneficial to all our constituent societies and members in forwarding a unified approach to spinal conditions. So I'm pleased to say that we are leaving the society solvent, which has been our main challenge. We've had a team that have embraced the restrictions that have had to be put in place, and that's encouraging. And I think everyone recognizes that times have been very difficult over the last few years, and of course that's affected everyone, whether it's your own lives with homeschooling or your work environment. Personal lives have been challenged. So if anything comes of this, hopefully this is our once in a generation event, and there should be no more. So I thank the societies and the membership and the executive as I look forward to finding out who the new treasurer and new executive team will be. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. So the floor is open. A couple of things I'd say just before we get going is some of the things we don't have an opportunity to talk about, perhaps you might think are less important, but we often, when we're planning a meeting, think about relationships with other societies. You know, we had representation from some of the Pain Society here today. We might want representation from rheumatologists from time to time. So it's good if you could feedback to your own societies and to us how you view interacting with other societies as part of the collaboration of UKSSB. Second thing is sponsorship of charities. We've sponsored Horatio's Garden for 2 meetings now, and we've had thoughts about other spinal charities that we should be thinking of sponsoring. So if you have any strong thoughts about who you think we should sponsor, then please feed that back either straight to us or through your societies. Once again, we had a session on diversity, and so we're very anxious to include as many and diverse a group of people representing all of us. So please put yourselves forwards for both the constituent societies, the roles in those societies, but also roles for UKSSB. And we obviously want to look forward to how we're going to have meetings in the future. So we may, the options are a bit like when we're going through consent. First thing is to have no meetings. The second is to have virtual meetings only, hybrid meetings, or face-to-face. And at the moment, we can't really know that because we don't know where COVID is going. But we would appreciate a steer from members, and obviously you will have your views after this meeting, and we're very anxious to hear from them. So please fill in the pro forma telling us what you think of this meeting so that we can make plans for the future. So now we'll go to some of any of the questions. I don't have any in the chat room. This is one that I really have to put up there, from Sashin, saying Henry has been absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Henry, for all the hard work in this meeting. Yeah, we can't underestimate how tremendous Henry has been in keeping this meeting on the road and helping us through this very difficult transition from face-to-face to virtual. And without a doubt, without him, we'd have been completely scunnered. Neil Chiverton has sent us a message which is very cryptic. It says "ah," and that's all. So I'm not quite sure where that goes. So Neil, if you have anything more to say, please let us know. More commendations for Henry. He needs a medal, or more. Oh, Neil was going to say here, here. Well, I think unless there are any other pressing things people would like to bring up, then I think we'll wrap it up. We've got a BAS meeting coming up in 3 or 4 minutes, and so I'll conclude there. So thanks very much for everybody's contribution today. It's been a great success. So please, let's get going tomorrow and have a grand finale where you don't have to spend half the day getting home again. So let's see you tomorrow morning, bright and breezy. Bye-bye.